Hey folks, this week we are talking about fair and accurate representations of crime scenes, which is a pretty important topic because our fair and accurate representations of the evidence really set the stage for us. In the next couple weeks we're going to talk about crime scenes and crash scenes, injuries. So, up until this point in our semester we've just kind of talked about photographic principles, basic photographic principles. And yes, I do realize some of you, this is review because you have backgrounds in photography, but for a number of you, all these terms were brand new. Many of you have never even used a camera besides what was built into your cell phone before this class. So what we need to make sure that we're doing here is we're taking our crime scene photos and our evidence photos is documenting the scene. Remember that scientific method idea that we talked about in the Intro to Forensic Science class. Facts first, assumptions later. We want to document the facts. We want to show all those facts in a way that later on we can create a hypothesis about what happened. And if we visually storytell somebody, we take enough photos and we present those photos to them, such as what we called visual storytelling. If we create this visual story for our folks, they will come to that same hypothesis, that same conclusion that we do also, as long as it's based on fact, and our photographs are showing those facts. So what we're doing is we're allowing our photographs to tell the story. Now, the big thing is we need to make sure that the jury can see these photos. So we have to do stuff that causes these photos to be fair and accurate and allow them to be admissible in court. Because if you start taking a bunch of photos of, say, a bullet hole in somebody's head, and you don't even have a picture showing that this is a crime scene at a house, that you're not even showing a picture of the room, showing that there's a dead guy laying on the floor. You just start with, boom, this little hole in the head. There's no admissibility there because we have no context to this. And if you don't have context to something, well, now you suddenly look incompetent. And if you're looking incompetent, our jury is going to not look upon you very favorably. And the more incompetent we are, the less likely we are to win a case. And again, our job is to prove the facts, not win the case. But when we're talking about, the fact is somebody killed somebody, the fact is somebody committed a crime, the fact is somebody stole something from somebody, we would still like to make sure that those facts get presented to a jury and let the jury weigh that evidence. And one of the things we have to worry about too is this idea of image authentication, that if we have truly fair and accurate images, that we can authenticate them and we can say, yes, this picture is this wound, and this picture is this wound, and this picture is this fingerprint, and this picture is this fingerprint, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that there is no doubt in our minds or in the minds of the jury that what we are showing them actually is what happened there at that crime scene. Now, of course, photographs have a few kind of issues, a couple problems inherent here. Color reproduction. We've kind of mentioned about that under the right street lights, under the right lighting conditions, you can end up having colors look wrong. You have a yellow car and you have street lights that put out blue light. Yellow and blue makes green. So we need to make sure that we're, fairly and accurately representing colors by providing enough light into the crime scene or doing the proper white balances to make sure that these colors are reflected in our images properly. These days, most of our cameras have auto white balance, so it's not as big of a deal, but it's something you still should be cognizant of. We start talking about dynamic range, which colors and which densities and whatnot we can show. We even start thinking about resolution. Are you taking photos? Are you trying to save memory on your memory card and taking a whole bunch of photos at 1 and 2 megapixel, and now we're going to try and present them as a big poster in court? It doesn't work, because it starts to get pixelated. We've talked a lot of stuff about, our angle of view and our perspectives, so are we showing something a perspective that is proper? A lot of artistic photographers, they like to get down low and take these cool Dutch angles and stuff like that makes a picture very compelling visually from an artistic standpoint. We're not artists. Yes, there is an art to crime scene photography, but we're not artists. We are not going to take and put our pictures in a museum. We're not trying to create visually stunning photos. You fill the frame with as much of the evidence as you can and you take a good picture of it. And we make sure that our perspectives are not distorting anything. We talked a little bit too about zooming, using a normal lens, that 50 millimeter, which is like the human eye, so that what we see is this at the scene and not some distorted version of this, something bigger or smaller as we're zooming in. So a lot of those things kind of come into play, and so if we're using our cameras right, we should minimize these. Minimize them. You never completely eliminate them, but we should minimize them. And I believe it's in the reading that I posted on Blackboard. There's a little excerpt from Sandy Weiss, or Sanford Weiss, if you want to use full name. Sandy's a guy who's written a couple books about photography. He was not a police officer ever. He always worked for an engineering firm that did forensic engineering and bridge collapses and building collapses and stuff like that. Airline crashes even. He always talks about the fact that, you're going to make errors. You're going to have the wrong setting. You're going to assume that it's, this setting is what you need, and for whatever reason, the picture is going to come out a little dark. It's going to come out a little light. It's going to be underexposed. It's going to be overexposed, maybe even a little out of focus. 99% of the time, it's not a big deal. If it's a little out of focus, a little, your depth of field's a little off. If it's a little light, it's a little dark. It's not that big of a deal. It's still an accurate representation of the scene. It's when you start getting way out there in the extremes that we have the problems. Oftentimes too these days with digital photography, if you can look at the LCD on the camera and you say, hey, that photo didn't turn out very well, you can snap another one. And in court, we never delete anything off of our cameras. So in court, we're going to say, yeah, I took a bad picture, but look, I followed up with a good picture, so it's okay. Something else that comes in with our fair and accurate, because we're talking about image authentication, that whole management of the imaging. How do we download our photos? Do we do it manually? Do we use some of our digital record-keeping software packages that are out there for automating downloads? How do we browse through pictures? Do we start tagging them? These days we're tagging photos, believe it or not. Much like you tag posts in social media, we can tag photos, and so we can quickly look up and find suspect pictures or pictures of buildings and scenes, different things that we need to do from a police department standpoint for intelligence gathering. Something that happens too is we want to make sure we protect our copyrights. So sometimes we put little watermarks on our photos. The last thing I want is one of my crime scene photos somehow getting in the hands of somebody and showing up on Facebook or some other social media platform. So we're very careful about that. There's open records requests. People can get our photos, but do we want our photos, some of our photos, showing up on social media? Not really, but that's just the reality. Printing, virtual tours. As we said, we can put our photos together. We go to court. We oftentimes put our photos into PowerPoints and we walk the jury through. And these days too, a lot of our photos are being shared on some kind of city network. What is the process for accessing that network? What is the process for who has access to that network? Does that network connect out to the whole internet, or is that just an internal network that only connects to computers inside of our building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a lot of these things that we would need to make sure that we have in our policies and procedures and that we have in our workflow. Now, some other things that come into authentication. We don't edit our photos. There is some ability for us to use Photoshop in police work, clean up a photo, add our watermarks and things like that. But the original photos we always keep pristine. So we will make copies of our crime scene photos and we will work on those if we want to add watermarks and do things to clean them up a little bit or adjust the colors. So we really need to make sure that we have a good chain of custody. Sometimes even we use encryption software to encrypt our photo, our hard drives on our computers where we save our photos. All these things need to be laid out in your operating procedures and your policy manuals. And these are things that as a new CSI, when you get out there, you shouldn't have to worry too much about, but there's some good questions to ask. What is our policy for this? How is this handled? So you should understand how image management is handled and how we maintain a chain of custody of images, so you know that your images will be authentic, that nobody went in and photoshopied them. All right, now next week we are going to talk about crime scene photography and the week after crash scene photography. Remember the process. Remember what we talked about in Intro to CSI. This is part of our fair and accurate also. The fact that we start with an image of a photo placard. Where are we at? What's our address? What's our case number? And then we take the pictures of the location itself. Go down the block, get a photo of the street sign, get a photo of the front of the house, get a photo of the front of the business, get a photo of the name. Then our evidence photos, the overalls, showing the whole room, the mid-ranges, showing some evidence and its relation to other objects in the room. The close-ups, getting those detail shots of the evidence, and then the close-ups with scales. This process is also part of fair and accurate representation. As I started this recording off with, if I start off a crime scene investigation by showing a photo of a bullet hole in somebody's head, and I don't show a picture of their face, I don't show the house, I don't show where they're at, where there's no context, it's just hole in head, it's not a fair and accurate representation of the scene. I got to show the overall room with the body on the floor and a picture of the person and then the hole in the head, so that now we have context from walking through the process. That is what we're talking about here. All right, hope this helps. If anybody has any questions, I'm always around. Feel free to stop in and see me at the Public Safety Training Center. Shoot me an email, give me a phone call. Otherwise, I will talk with you next week. Thank you.